Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blaugrana and everything, and welcome back to the channel. And well, it's been a relatively quiet week this time around from Barcelona on the transfer front. I mean, we have, of course, seen some of the quote unquote sagas that were brewing, come to their natural conclusion. And well, I guess in this case, the only one that was looking likely to be a saga was the Bernardo Silva deal. And he has now been snapped up by Real Madrid, and so has somebody else who we talked about as being a possible target for Barca. Someone who I should once again reiterate, I did say, like, you know what, I don't really see a need for Barcelona to sign him. I'm, of course, talking about Marc Cucurella, who, joins a very, what could we say, hated club now amongst culés of La Masia graduates who have signed for Real Madrid. I don't know, he might be the biggest profile La Masia graduate, I guess, to sign for Real Madrid. And, we've got some Real Madrid fans trying to force angles like, this is now like the Luis Figo, except this time it's from La Masia. And it's like, bro, Luis Figo? And you're talking about Cucurella? Anywho, we do know, of course, that for Bernardo Silva, of course, it had to do a lot with certain guarantees Barcelona were not going to make in as far as playing time is concerned, which that makes sense. Look at, how stacked Barcelona's midfield is in that area that Bernardo Silva would play in. But also, we've been told there has been some, there's a fair bit of money that was demanded by Bernardo Silva. As we can see here from this report from, this is Atletico Universe, what he was asking for, he was looking at a 10 million signing bonus on top of a 10 million net salary per season, which is, a 20 million gross. And that totals over 3 years to about 60 million euros. And I mean, dude, 60 million euros for Bernardo Silva is way too much money. Of course, Real Madrid right now, they are in a bit of a situation where they need something, they need some wins, they need to, more or less rebuild. So here we have them now, they've basically replaced everybody who they bought last summer. Dean Huijsen's being replaced by Konate, you got Dumfries coming in as well, you got Mourinho replacing Xabi Alonso, you've got Bernardo basically replacing, what's his name, Mastantuono, and of course Mr. Cucurella over here replacing Carreras. So, like I said, personally, I'm not too bothered by Cucurella going to Madrid. I mean, for them, maybe he moves the needle, but I think he doesn't do much for them in the biggest moments. Because, like, look, if you saw Real Madrid against Bayern Munich, did you see that match and think, you know what, Real Madrid are missing a Cucurella here? Yeah, if they had a Cucurella, that would solve all their problems. Or do you think if they had a Dumfries, then, they would be just so much better? No, that's not what you thought, is it? It's not what I thought either. So that's why it doesn't really bother me. Next, now we're looking at the fact that after Atletico failed to get Cucurella, they're now going and moving to Grimaldo, who, of course, we know as well is someone who is out there now. I did say that Grimaldo is, between him and Cucurella, Grimaldo would have been my preferred target, because if Barca do sign Grimaldo, he does actually bring something different to their team. The team looks a lot different with Grimaldo. You could say on the top level, offensively, he's going to add more to Barcelona than, a Cucurella could have added or than a Cambiaso could add. But there's, of course, the fact that defensively, he's maybe a bigger negative than João Cancelo. So, keep that in mind. Of course, he's younger than Cancelo by just 2 years, but, I mean, I'm just glad we're not in a situation where we did sell Alejandro Balde, like some people were suggesting, like, sell Balde and then, sign Grimaldo. So you have Grimaldo and Cancelo. This is not, well, Barcelona needs to get back to what they do best, which is developing players. You need to develop this guy. If you develop this guy, he's a better fullback on any day of the week than a Cucurella, okay? We're talking somebody who legitimately you can demand, 50 or 60 million for, which, by the way, Real Madrid are paying 60 million for Cucurella. Is that a good deal if you ask me? No, it's not. He's worth maybe about half of that. 40 million if we're being very generous. So, yeah. Anyhow, like I said, on the Barca front, it's mostly been quiet, but we do have news about the likes of, Hamza Abdel Karim finally being like, officially signed by Barcelona. They activated that by option. So we'll wait to see how that situation with him is going to develop. And of course, you also have the likes of Ferran Torres now, who has, he looks on track to be agreeing a renewal with FC Barcelona. So we're going to wait and see how all of that plays out, but we do know that there's been some, some interest from PSG for Ferran Torres. The interest is primarily in the case where PSG feel like, if they lose someone like Barcola, they can replace him with someone like Ferran Torres. And that's interesting to hear because we do know that we got some news of links between Barcelona and Barcola. So right now, that just leaves us in a case of, maybe asking, why is there this silence now, all of a sudden, from FC Barcelona, looking at how, they started the off season. They started it by, signing, Anthony Gordon, and then they moved on from there. And we heard about the offer, obviously, we heard about the offer for Julian Alvarez. So now the question you would have is, well, where is all of that gone? Why is Barcelona going quiet all of a sudden? And it's especially, I guess, a question you could ask, looking at how, Real Madrid have been moving in recent days, since basically Florentino Perez has been announced as president. They've announced, about 4 signings, 5 if we're counting Jose Mourinho as well. So, the question is there, like, hey, what's going on with Barca? Why are they not, why are they suddenly just going quiet? And I think it's important to know, especially for Culés, is that, Barcelona don't have, first of all, the same urgency as Real Madrid, not because they're less, what's the word that I'm looking for? Savvy in the market, though you could make an argument for that, but not because of that. It's because, they have less work to do. They're in less of a panic. Real Madrid right now, a lot of what they're doing is covering up for how bad things have been on the pitch, whether it's Florentino Perez going into a press conference and crashing out, which, by the way, like this is the weakest I've ever seen Florentino Perez look, We're so used to him being that boogeyman figure type of guy, where we rarely ever hear from him or see him. Only see him in our classicals up in the president's box, and maybe at the end of the season when he's like propping up another Champions League trophy next to all the other ones. There's that little tradition of his, and we really didn't used to hear much from him. So seeing how much talking he's been doing lately, and seeing how much of that talking has had to do with Barca, and just how so many of the moves that he's making have seemed to have, a lot to do with what Barca are planning or what Barca are trying to do. For me, it's been like seeing a weakness to him, and your weaker side. You've got guys like this kid right here, Munoz, who, Real Madrid, once the moment they heard that Barcelona were, just even mildly looking at him, they just went full on crazy, made sure they inserted all sorts of crazy, buybacks into his contracts. As now we know that they're selling him to Newcastle United. Is most likely going there to replace Anthony Gordon, which we'll see how all of that goes. All the best to him. Personally, I don't think he's that type of a guy. He's not that kind of a guy whereby you really want to be signing him. I mean, look, that's him. Just like, look, for me, he's a bit overrated. I'll put it that way. But hey, we'll see how it goes. I could turn out to be wrong. He could go on and improve and become a much better finisher than he is now. But yeah, you're looking at things like that, and just some of the other moves Real Madrid is making. I mean, 2 of the guys they've signed this window are people who've been, openly linked with FC Barcelona. So, it is looking a bit, it's giving obsessed, as the kids would say, all right, from Florentino Perez from Real Madrid. And you could tell that Barcelona right now is really under their skin, and they're really, really desperate now to get one over on Barca. And it makes sense because, like I had mentioned in the other week, they're watching Barcelona get all of the, the glory, all of the plaudits that they feel they should have been getting. You heard him in those press conferences where he's talking about, I should have won 7 more La Ligas and all of that stuff. So it is something which, because of, the current, situation and how vulnerable they're probably feeling, because of all of that, he's moving the way he's moving, and they're making all of these signings that we're seeing. So that's why they're out here, trying to force angles. Like, look, they are comparing Figo with Cucurella. By the way, Figo, when he was at Barca and he left to Real Madrid, was a Ballon d'Or winner. Never mind, he made the move directly. Cucurella has been through 5 other teams now. He was at Eibar, he was at Getafe, he was at Brighton. I've forgotten where else he was before, he then went to Chelsea, and then he joins Real Madrid. And of course, they're trying to act like, oh, this is as big as the Figo moment. So I guess this is the big star that Perez was talking about, which, again, I don't really buy that also, because I think they only really signed Cucurella, aside from him being a Barca target, because they couldn't, make any headway with, Calafiori. They made noise about Calafiori and Gvardiol. So they couldn't get those two, and they thought, 60 mil isn't enough for them. Let's just go for, let's go for Cucurella. Yeah. And, we get all this talk of, oh, Mourinho wanted a left back. And more importantly for me is you're seeing a lot of these statements like Real Madrid will now have a Spanish national team player in the World Cup. And it's like, no surprises. They're really the type of team that would be petty enough to buy someone just so they can be in the end club. So it'll be fun to see if he's going to be in the next Euros, though. Because you know what? Dean Huijsen was part of the Spain national team setup until they signed him. Now, he can barely get a look in. So, all the best, Mr. Cucurella. And enough of all of that anyway. For Barca, the news in as far as transfers, for now, that's what it is. We might maybe hear some news, maybe some updates to do with some fullbacks maybe next week. I'm thinking probably that Cambiaso situation. We're going to hear a conclusion for all of it, and we'll at least know where Barcelona stands in as far as left backs are concerned. Of course, during this past week, we also saw Barcelona's buy option on Rashford expire. So Rashford is back to being a Man United player. So that's probably another bit of news that I maybe neglected to mention from the start. But hey, it was a slow week otherwise in as far as updates are concerned. And so because of that, there's not that much to talk about insofar as Barca transfer news goes, aside from just, maybe Real Madrid looking a bit too obsessed, which that being the highlight of the off-season so far, because I just realized the transfer window isn't even yet opened. It's opening in July, start of July. So we can't even say that, since the transfer window opened or whatever. This is just all really happening now in this era before we see anything from the transfer window. So for now, we'll wait to see how everything plays out. But I don't know. Aside from that, please, you tell me what you think. Of course, this man here, in a lot of people's books, he's probably going to go down like something of a snake or whatever, especially after he made this statement just, earlier on in the month, or that should have been in May. Why would I go to Real Madrid? I would rather shave my hair than go there. But hey, I guess he changed his mind, right? But yeah, for me, again, like I said, this isn't really the type of transfer that moves the needle for me because, like I said, in the big matches against your Bayerns, against your PSGs, against your Arsenals, he's not really going to add that much more on the pitch than what all the other guys before him were doing. And well, if you're Barca, you just wait. That's what you do for now. You just wait. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Do have a great day, and Forza Barca.